the prison board, the Board of Corrections, the Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the Attorney General. There's a dispute that's just ongoing, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why people keep resigning. I mean, I guess I know why people keep resigning, but I for the life of me just can't figure out what's going on. It's all very confusing, but it has to do with a power struggle. It has to do with the power struggle between, should we start calling it the prison industrial complex? There's a power struggle between the prison industrial complex and Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So Axios has written about this. I found this interesting, right? So what to know about Governor Sanders' dispute with the Board of Corrections. So what do we need to know about it? All right, well, it's a months-long argument between Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders and the State Board of Corrections over adding prison beds. It's now going to go to court. When was this written? This was January 4th, so this was early. This was over a month ago, right? We're now well into the month of February. The big picture: Sanders and Corrections Board Joe Profiri, who was appointed by Sanders and confirmed by the board, wants to add beds to the prisons. The Correction Board objects, saying the prisons aren't sufficiently staffed to accommodate the requested increase in inmates, which could pose safety. There's even talk about the prison board wanted the National Guard to come in and do it. Profiri on November 6th asked the board and its chairman, Benny Magnus, to open 622 beds at state prisons, but only 130 were approved. Sanders' administration planned to go ahead with adding the beds anyway after Profiri disputed the state's concerns. And the Corrections Board then suspended Profiri on December 14th, which really made the governor, upset. And this is what kind of started the power struggle. The board also filed a lawsuit asking a judge to block enforcement of portions of a new law. This was the big prison reform law that was being debated basically a year ago at this point. They say that the law removes the board's ability to hire and fire the corrections secretary, arguing it violates the state constitution. See, the prison board is kind of put into the state constitution, very similar to the Arkansas Game and Fish, which is a different amendment, and we covered this the last time, or one of the last times on the program. Sanders called for Magnus to resign after he requested the 138 National Guard members be deployed to work full-time at the state's prisons. Meanwhile, State Attorney General Tim Griffin sued the board, accusing its members of violating the Freedom of Information Act. In the closed session hiring of attorney Abtin Medizigan. I'm reminded of that Office Space. Naga, not going to work here anymore, so it doesn't matter. To represent the board in the lawsuit against Sanders and Profiri. Okay. Then we have Judge Tim Fox on December 19th. He said that he would dismiss Griffin's lawsuit, giving him 30 days to reach an agreement with the board over the request for special counsel, according to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Between the lines, you have somebody called the Protect Arkansas Act, something called the Protect Arkansas Act. So this is the prison reform bill. Went into effect January 1st. The act changes corrections policies, including lessening and sometimes eliminating parole eligibility for many felonies, likely leading to a larger inmate population, right? We want people to actually serve their sentences, especially violent criminals. This is where the rub is, right? The state's prisons are holding about 16,440 inmates, despite a capacity of 15,000, according to the Associated Press, if you can believe them. What's next? The Corrections Board and Magnus are asking that the temporary restraining order issued December 15th be converted into a preliminary injunction. Wow. Yeah, so this is ongoing. Now, in the meantime of all this, you have this story. So Arkansas governor calls on prison board chairman to resign. Oh, I'm sorry, this was back in, I'm getting ahead of myself. This was way back in December 22nd. But this is just kind of to catch you up. And we have this story, which is odd, right? So we missed this. This was back on Groundhog Day. Arkansas Parole Board chair appointee reportedly resigns after report of sexual relationship with teen girl. Jamal Jones. This is how, do we have the audio here? I believe we do. Let me pull it up for you. This is how they covered it over at THV 11.
When Jamal Jones got a governor's appointment to chairman of the Post-Prison Transfer Board. 6 days later, that story emerged. He has resigned.
And this is just the latest controversy surrounding the board and Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. In his resignation, Jones saying in part, quote, "It has been the honor of my life to serve the people of Arkansas in this capacity. adding he is thankful to the Sanders administration for the opportunity, but this was the best decision for he and his family. We first told you how Benton police fired Jones about a year into his career as an officer back in 2018. A criminal investigation found that a 17-year-old girl initiated a sexual relationship and kept her age a secret. Jones never faced charges, in part because the teen's mother didn't want to see him, quote, go to jail. But the department fired Jones for initially lying about the nature of the relationship.
All right, so yeah, so we have that. This is a mess, man. This is a mess. There's really no getting around it. Yeah, this was Josh Schneider's take on it. Jamal Jones, who Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders recently appointed to be chairman of the Arkansas Post-Prison Transfer Board, resigned Friday. So when I guess he was, as a police officer, he messed up big time. Wasn't honest about a relationship he had with a 17-year-old in a car. Huh. Yeah, and then the legislature had to do their thing and, confirm it all. Just so strange, right? But then we have this. Okay, so former Arkansas State Senator, this is Eddie Joe Williams, somebody who I'm familiar with, used to cover Eddie Joe Williams and his voting record specifically. Former Arkansas State Senator resigns after 5 days as the interim corrections secretary. Let me see if I can't make this a little bit more legible for you folks. Yeah, that'll do it. So a former Republican state senator resigned as temporary head of Arkansas's prison system on Tuesday, less than a week after his appointment. The Arkansas Board of Corrections tapped former Senator Eddie Joe Williams of Cabot as interim secretary of corrections on January 31st, but Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Attorney General Tim Griffin immediately challenged the board's authority. Okay, so I guess former Senator Eddie Joe Williams saying, look, man, I don't want any of this drama in my life. You don't have the authority. This is gonna come down. This is gonna be a big showdown. You don't. I mean, who has the authority here? Does this new law have? Does this new law? Is it in line with the Constitution? If it is in line with the Constitution, then the new law stands. If it's not in line with the Constitution, then they don't have the authority. So it's a power struggle right now. Yeah, so it's interesting to listen to the mainstream media report on this because this is how THV covers.
And the Board of Corrections asked to run the state's prison says thanks but no thanks. The latest twist in this long-running fight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Faith Woodard.
And I'm Rolly Hoyt. Former lawmaker and Mayor Eddie Joe Williams sent a letter to the board today declining their appointment to be the interim Secretary of Corrections. In it, he admits his appointment, quote, took on a life of its own, and said he didn't feel like he'd be able to accomplish his goals. Of course, a letter from State Attorney General Tim Griffin last week warned the board that it doesn't have the power to name Williams or anyone to the job. The board had hoped to see the longtime Republican leader mend the relationship with Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders after they fired her choice for Secretary, Joe Profiri.
And of course, we have been following this story for months as the board and the governor argue over who has the final say over prisons in the state. For a complete rundown of our coverage, head over to thv11.com. Links to all of our past.
Yeah, I mean, again, what a mess. I don't think anybody saw this coming. Well, I mean, I don't know. It is an absolute mess. I will say the one thing I think I asked this to a few. I mean, I definitely know that it was like the one feedback that I got last year as I was trying to cover the Arkansas legislature. We were doing weekly shows then, and I was trying to cover the prison reform bill and everything that was going on with it. And I think I remember that being one of the critiques was staff. I kept hearing staffing. It just didn't really register with me because I'm just like, I'm looking at the high points of the bill, which the high points of the prison reform bill are. We've got violence in our communities. There's no doubt that we do. We made the strong case for it. You can just look at the headlines on a day-to-day basis, and violence in Arkansas is increasing, right? And that is a terror on the people. And we should want a government that is going to reward good and punish evil. And one of the ways that we punish evil is by locking people up and making them do their time. And hopefully they'll, ideally, if they do get out, they're not going to be violent anymore. But if they are, they've we want to protect our citizens. We want them to be safe, want our property to be protected, and want law enforcement to be in support. This is all common sense stuff, right? But the one thing that I didn't hear, the one thing that I did hear, I guess, was, hey, but if we're going to have, a bigger prison, and I know that's a plan down the road, but we also have to have staff. Okay. Well, I just kind of dismissed it. Turns out the people of the prison board think it's a really big deal, big enough to get into this legal battle here. I'm not sure what happens. I don't know. I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I'm not sure what happens if you just go ahead and add the beds without adding the staff. Does that make it a powder keg potentially? Or is it just really no big deal, nothing to worry about? I don't know. I don't know the infrastructure behind these prisons. I don't know, anything about it. We've got people who are saying, look, they're pushing back against the governor who wants to make real changes and I believe want to make Arkansans more safe. I believe that is clearly the intent here. They say they want more staff, though. So anyway, really fascinating stuff.